Hope you like my title sequence. As you can see, this is totally unprepared. But I'm at a particular point in the project I'm working on at the moment, recording an album, in which things are proceeding nicely. And the way I'm approaching it is through designing for Serendipity. And serendipity is the notion of a happy accident, where you, for example, discover the land of Ceylon has lots of precious gemstones. Sri Lanka, where I lived for a year, by the way. In the case of working on an album, what I've been doing is setting things up to encourage happy accidents. So if I stumble, make it part of a dance. If a happy accident, couldn't think of another one, unprepared. And various things, various different methods go into it. I am doing experimental music, but not in the sense of the experimental method. The serendipitous method, shall we call it, designed for serendipity, is more about, well, traditional experimentation is about having a hypothesis and testing it. This is about creating an environment in which you can make changes, and changes can happen at random. And sometimes those changes will be positive. And the idea is to incline the situation so that it favours the interesting stuff, and that you try and get the situation where if you just roll some dice, did have some dice in a second ago, you roll some dice, voila, you will get something that stands a good chance of being either useful, interesting, or useful, or interesting. Unprepared. So, there are different aspects to this, the things. Constraints I'll come to, but a big one in practice in this situation of working on an album is the user interface for the tools that you're using. You don't just need the tools, you need to be able to use them. And I found in quite relatively recently, given how long I've been around this stuff, the modular setup is quite a nice way of working. And then with this, I can, it's like muscle memory, but it's cognitive memory. Cognitive memory as in its memory. I know that if I do this, and then do that, it'll do something which I'll demonstrate in a second. Once I talk about the kind of almost the antithesis of that user interface is the computer interface, typical keyboard, mouse and monitor, which is brilliant for a lot of things. It's great for coding, and the coding itself is an interface. And you've got to keep it in its place, the computer. I mostly use it for the recording side of things, although here, that was a fib. I don't mostly use it for the recording side of things. Here, I've got a project template. And this template has got various parts to it that fit with things I've played with, that I know that kind of work, that might work. If I have an idea, or I want to play around with something, this might work. So, for example, if I set that going, that's a plugin I've written using another part of this interface, which is coding environment, VS Code. And what you were seeing there was me using this that's some code that's mostly written by AI, Codex and Claude Code, using that, which is a good interface for coding on, not so much for doing the music stuff on itself. But I've got about, I don't know, must be getting on for 20 different plugins I've done this way. I'm just playing with ideas. And the user interface of the AI is brilliant for this. And I'm actually very positive about the idea of music, AI used for music. Even though people will claim that it's stealing existing ideas and there's no creativity involved. Well, Picasso's one about great artists steal. That definitely applies. I've not actually found much use for the kind of Suno style make up a song for me thing. I don't think it's quite there yet, really, the large language model based and the deep learning models behind it for that. There is one that I've been using for mastering, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So this part of it, I've got the user interface there, that I was able to, from memory, get something right. Another useful tool is templates for things that have worked in the past. All right, it's already sequencing. So if I turn this up now, this sequencer being quantized, going through that, giving me that. But I'll return to the use of code again, because right here I have, well, some of my own modules. And these two, although the hardware wasn't my design, they are KXMX Blue Ken modules, Daisy seed based things. I've done a load of algorithms for those that, well, AI has done most of the work for them. And I saw a note on Reddit saying that asking if there was a module that would do a nice kind of sub bass, like a pedal, like a guitar pedal that can do a sub octave, but in a neater kind of way than that. Long story short, I coded one up, and now it's a happy accident. I can use that sub on a lot of things. Throw a drum machine through, it's great. And then another aspect, the user interface, there's constraints. Like everybody but the rich kids that usually use modular, I'm relatively constrained financially. So these are like the really dirt cheap ones. And I've got one of the worst drum machines here. A lot of it's Behringer, who do cheap knockoffs of decent gear and very little of it original. And they've got a bad reputation, basically, amongst the snobs of the modular community. But I have the constraint is working under capitalism. So I'm not going to stop using a particular company's equipment because I disagree with their politics, because it's in an environment where you're on a hiding to nothing. I have to accept that we're living under capitalism and there's a lot of rubbish there. Choices, yeah, I will make a lot of choices in things I purchase, but within reason. And when it comes to modular things, on balance, I'm a cheapskate. So yeah, Wordsworth drum machine. But then I can have this trigger. And within the constraints of what that drum machine can do, I can also use it as a sequencer. Well, yes, as a sequencer, a trigger sequencer. And I really like the 808 style already. That's sounding kind of interesting. What else? What else? Unprepared. Oh yeah. Serendipity. I am a very bad guitarist. Very bad guitarist. But I discovered thanks to this. You can play bad guitar on the modular as well. So, templates. Creating the... I'm not quite sure how to capture the idea of coding things and using AI to code things. But that's going back to fundamentals. It's making your own instruments. This is a homemade slide guitar, Hawaiian style, played with a bottleneck. Make your own instruments. Behind me, like that's a plate reverb that's in progress. Make your own instruments. By doing so, this album I'm working on, I know it's not going to be much like anything else because of the things I'm using to make it. It's kind of de facto going to be a bit different somehow. No matter what goes on in my head when I'm actually composing, if you can call it composing, the fact that I'm using unusual equipment is going to make a difference. Toy box is a good one. Oh, yeah. A lot of probabilistic things come into it. Is that actually recording reversed? Unbelievable. But here's a list of different things I can do on a recording I'm working on. And depending on the roll of the dice, two die, so it's more probable that I'll get long sounds or gestures. Gestures are meaning by making a phrase in the middle of something. Reamp I've got there, reamp it through, send something out to an amplifier and record it again. That gives it a different ambience. Got clarinet, guitar, toy box over there. Plug-in, I've got all the plugins I've made. Voice, I've not actually used any voice on the thing so far, but it's there to play with. Other things, by doing things algorithmically as well, you can work towards serendipity, because I know the idea of a Euclidean rhythm where you're dividing, say, 16 bars into evenly spaced bits are likely to sound something like something like a reasonable rhythm. So I've got one of the plugins I've made, well, several of the plugins I've made involve Euclidean rhythms. So for that's actually quite bad. But that's right. But it's unusual. That's not something I would have anticipated there. I don't know if that would work with anything. Let's try it with the bass I got just now. There we go. And the temptation is immediately there to try and do something with it. And you're making yourself be a tool of the serendipity. Because that, my immediate thing there would actually be to see what could add on top rather than, and then probably have to go back to that beat that was a bit questionable. It's from a wildlife documentary. So there, I've got one of the most rubbish samplers ever in this. But I could always use the computer for sampling. But I quite like using this drum sampler there. It was about €100, dirt cheap, and is rubbish. But the constraints that puts on you, because I know it's going to be rubbish, I can't actually play a scale on that, kind of forces you to, it forces a kind of creativity. Field recordings, very cheap little device, a Zoom. This one's seen better days. It's been out in the field a bit too much. Then for other sounds, I've got the toy box. Of course, all the homemade bits and pieces. And there is a cowbell in there. So, what have we got? We've got constraints, we've got templates, we've got using the tools available to make your own tools. I mean, the modules that I've done the algorithms for, that's an algorithm, but I've used the coding tools, the AI tools, using the coding tools to make the music tools, to make the music. And that kind of chain of setting things up, setting up dominoes, so that chances are, when you push over a domino, it's going to have some kind of a knock-on effect. And you want it to go to a positive thing, which a flow of dominoes is great. What else? Running out of energy now. Got some beer waiting for me. So serendipity, try and set up the environment in such a way that random events. One common issue people have with that are using computer music, especially if you go to something like techno style, you'll have an 8-bar loop. And you might have many 8 different layers over 8 bars. Your bass, your synths or whatever. And then you've somehow got to take that and arrange it into a larger piece. Well, what I've done, what I'm going to be using extensively on this album is 2 plugins. One is a purely stochastic, probabilistic mixer that will, according to how I'm not going to demonstrate it, but they're very I'll demonstrate. So that drum, the bass drum, will play for a bit and then it will silence. Oh, there we go, that bass drum. So that track is being mixed in and mixed out at random, under some constraints. Like I've got it set so now it will do a bar and then it may or may not, according to probability, bring it back in or take it back out again. It might fade or it might cut in and cut out. I've got a similar thing for it's a little harder to demonstrate because it takes time. This one's using a Euclidean rhythm, and this one's set to 8 hits in 16 bars, so it's spacing it out evenly. So this will actually be very, very regular. But the combination of the Euclidean and the random one mean that I can do mixes. So what I used for the intro, oh no, that's not the right version. Recent projects. So this, I've got, I don't know, 10 different layers, 10 different tracks there. They're each being determined whether they play or not by, they're being determined by that pair of probabilistic, well, one is the spacing and one is the probabilistic. and it'll move things in and move things out. Now, although you could quite easily argue that, well, leaving it up to random events is not a good idea because it's random. It's not you're actually, as the composer, doing things on purpose. But by leaving it up to the random, I can listen to that. I'm not exactly sure the way it's getting the seed for the first bar. It plays everything right at the start. I need to go back to the code a little bit. But that needs spacing out, and I can hear that, it's playing everything. But then it goes into different, say, 4 of the 8 different layers that are there playing. And some of the transitions work, some don't. And what I can do is, for each set of, I've got it into folders, so that I've got the top instruments, middle instruments, bass. I can chunk it into those and render them down so that it's actually recorded with the probabilistic part of it. And then I can edit on top of that. So rather than me spending hours trying to imagine what it might sound if I bring this in, then bring that out, I can just let it run and let it do what it wants. And if I like it, I can have it, I can keep that. If I don't like it, forget it. And so it's that setting things up for happy accidents, the serendipity. Now I really am running out of things to talk about. Yeah, that'll have to do. I may come back to this. I'm hoping to have this album done in about a month. How I'll release it or whatever, I have no idea, but something like a CD's worth of material. Yes. Returning to things. So I had the main hard drive in that crash on me about a few months ago. And so, I got backups, but I actually left the backups because I've been playing around with the modular and things were changing. And so I got something I recorded 2 or 3 times a week. I'll actually record it. And then going back over it, as you can see from that, I've highlighted some of the tracks that I thought, well, that's a maybe to work on some more. And it's about 1 in 10 perhaps of the things worked on. Having a break and listening to it again a week later, a month later. Some things I did years ago, listened to again, I thought, that's actually a good idea. Maybe I can do something with that. And that having fresh ears, I think that's very important with the music stuff. And then, a lot of these, I'll give it another hour or two and then find, well, it doesn't actually do anything for me. And so leave it. And so I've narrowed things down. I've got about 25 or so different pieces of which less than half I'll let through. If the worst comes to the worst, I'll roll a dice to pick which and which order to do them in. And then try it. And then try it and see if that actually works. If it doesn't, roll the dice again. So, yeah, random but with intention. And designed for serendipity. my recommendation.